Hello guys, this is Felipe from the Noob Trader, and in today's video, what I plan on discussing is the recent price action we've been seeing in the gold market, what's been causing this, sudden, short-term bullish price action. Also touch on the Fed press conference that's happening later today, and just kind of discuss where I personally see gold price potentially going from here, especially after the Fed meeting. So let's get into it. So in the last video that I did about gold price, which was just before the inflation data that came out, what I mentioned is that I'm not sure if the gold market is really ready for a bullish breakout, and that we would probably get rejected at the 1830 number just because um, I wasn't sure if the high inflation number was really going to be enough of a catalyst to spark a move upwards. Okay, and we sure enough we did get rejected at 1830. There wasn't that much movement as a result of the inflation number. But what we've really interestingly seen over the last week or so is that gold finally actually broke this 1830 barrier, which was obviously proven very strong on the daily chart. And we almost kind of made it, new support here on the chart. And now we're kind of testing this higher end of this wedge that we've drawn out, price wedge, which has kind of been forming for quite a few months at this point. All right, so we're definitely on the higher end of the gold price at the moment. Um, and I guess the key question, first of all, to discuss is, well, what's actually caused this, right? And I think most people know this, but we're going to touch on it and just see how this has really been changing the dynamics of the gold market. So obviously, the first thing is the fact that the stock markets in general have just taken a massive hit with the Netflix news, with just the general fear coming out of inflation and interest rate hikes. It's really wild to see how much this narrative has really picked up, even though, for example, on this channel, we've discussed this narrative for fucking months. But I guess that's the benefit of being a gold trader. You're just so aware of economic dynamics. But obviously now the market's really starting to buy this up. And you can just see it's wild to see the stock market finally make this downward move, which is something that people have talked about happening for essentially years right now, right? Here's the S&P, and here's the Nasdaq 100, right? Really large correction. And it's just very clear from the interest rate hike narrative, the inflation narrative, and just seeing how the stock market has moved over the last weeks that, the market is becoming increasingly more fearful. And if there's one thing that we know as gold traders in particular is that gold price does extremely well. That's the ultimate catalyst for gold is fear. It leads to bullish price action. And I think that's what we're really seeing, right? During times of fear, not only is, gold, you know, uh, typically go up in price, but for that matter, most commodities and safe haven currencies start to do really well, right? That's just a general trend, or that's typically what happens. So silver has started to do well. Obviously, the yen's been doing well, and now even on the DXY, we really got that bounce that we were talking about before, previously on the channel. We finally got that bounce, and now we're trending back towards this relative high here, and especially with the Fed press conference happening later today, kind of looks primed potentially for a breakout here. Okay, so you can see fear is really coming, and as a result, safe havens are starting to do quite well, and that's what we're seeing with gold. On top of that, it's not just the issue of, or the market isn't just being, the gold market isn't just being pushed and pulled by the stock market and crypto market corrections, as well as the Fed, everything to do with the Fed and inflation and interest rates. But on top of that, we have the global political issue right now between the USA and Russia in terms of Ukraine. That's obviously really big news. Typically, these types of potential war scenarios lead to bullish price action for gold. Have to take that into consideration. And on top of that as well, we have the situation where the U.S. economy data-wise is just not doing or isn't, the recovery doesn't seem to be as strong as perhaps, for example, Powell would want. Jobs data is still bad, right? The last jobs data report that we saw, the initial jobless claims was not good, okay, or not what I'm sure that the Fed was expecting, okay? And this is obviously a concern. So when you take all of these different things, the interest rate, the inflation, um, the potential war between the U.S. and Russia, um, the stock market and crypto market collapse, when you start then looking into also just the general poor performance of the U.S. economy, this is actually leading to a very, very interesting fundamental narrative situation happening for the gold market, where on the one hand, you could say that we should be very, very bullish about gold price just because gold, again, does very, very well in these times of fear. Okay. And when there's fear, gold goes up. I mean, this has been proven historically, and there's no reason to necessarily doubt it would happen again. On the other hand, you could say that we also want to be really, really bearish about gold in the short term, just because with the interest rate news, or the expected interest rate hike going to happen probably in Q1 this year, right? This could really trigger a much, much bigger sell-off in just general financial markets overall, gold included, just because gold is not an interest-bearing asset, right, as we've discussed on the channel before. So we have this kind of like yin and yang situation going on. And as gold investors, we have to kind of figure out, well, which side are we going to lean on? Are we going to be more bullish right now in terms of from a fundamental standpoint in regards to gold, or are we going to be more bearish at the moment? Which kind of leads me now to what we can potentially expect from today's Fed press conference, right? There's an interest rate decisions coming out. I don't expect there to be an interest rate hike this time. That would just be, again, very not typical of how Powell typically acts in these situations. Powell likes to announce things very, very slowly, in a very, very calculated manner. He's going to announce a date first for an interest rate hike before actually doing it. So I do not expect the interest rate to change today from 0.25% to, let's say, 0.5%. But what I think most of the market is kind of expecting is that he will make an announcement for a date probably sometime in March. Okay. Um, I guess one smaller question you could potentially ask about the press conference later today is that whether the moves in the stock market um, are going to cause Powell to be a lot more cautious now about interest rate talk. Like I've said before, it's definitely not in Powell's interest to cause the stock market to correct well, I mean, definitely not like how it's corrected over the last week. It's totally not in his interest, and I don't think he wants to see the stock market correct further. Okay. However, I don't think that Powell is probably going to change his stance. Okay. The inflation issue is very, very serious. He's finally accepted it, and he's been really pushing out this narrative very slowly and meticulously that yes, we do need to do something about this inflation issue, and we do need to address it most likely. Well, one, with buying, decreasing the asset purchase program of the government, but also now slowly starting to increase interest rates. So I don't expect him to go away from this narrative. So I think that question is kind of obsolete. So I think the more important question that we need to talk about in terms of the press conference later today is, right, how is the market going to react to a potential announcement for an actual interest rate hike? Okay. Um, and my general feeling right now is that uh, well, in the very, very short term, like as soon as the press conference happens and maybe over the next 24, after the following 24 to 48 hours, there'll probably be some short-term, there'll be probably a short-term correction, a lot of volatility, especially in gold price, also in other equity markets or the crypto market, um, just continuing to contribute to this fear narrative. But in particular for gold, I think it's going to be very interesting to see where we do get a bounce if we get that short-term volatile correction. Because I think especially for gold traders or investors, once they realize that the interest rates still haven't gone up, maybe he gives a date, maybe he actually pushes the date back to Q2. We have to see what is announced. I think the narrative that gold is a safe haven for much more risk-on assets, such as tech stocks in the stock market or crypto or whatever it may be. I actually think that gold over let's say over the next week or so, next 1 or 2 weeks, could actually push higher from a bullish standpoint. Okay, I do actually think that gold could break up out of this wedge. How long? That really depends. Probably really depends on when the Fed eventually does implement the interest rate hike. But I could definitely see that happening, right? I mean, we just have to look at the market overall. The amount of narratives happening in the market at the moment that are contributing to so much serious fear is just overwhelming. And it's hard for me personally, as somebody who's looked at the gold market for quite some time, to bet against gold price going up when there's so much just fear in the market. And then on top of that, there's no real interest rate hike happening, but rather just, again, more talks about it. Okay. So let's see what happens. I think it would be really interesting to see gold potentially correct to the downside, maybe till, 1830, or 1810, 1800, those kind of levels that we've seen pretty strong support and resistance on the day chart, etc., and see if we can get a good bounce and follow through up from that. Especially if the stock market sees further corrections as a result of whatever Powell announces later today. Um, I think that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for. And hopefully then over the next week or so, especially if you're a gold bull, we can actually make a breakout out of this general price line that we've drawn out here, right? And then push towards that 1900 level, over the next week, 2 weeks, or whatever it may be. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm expecting. If we look at the technicals, like I said before, um, everything's also kind of pointing towards that, right? Um, the crypto markets, they are all those risk on kind of markets, they're at this position where everything's kind of doing that classic consolidation step down pattern, and it's kind of looking like there's not that much momentum there, and it wants to pull back further. So, especially if there's like a pretty strong announcement on Powell's end, which leads to further corrections into crypto and the stock market, I could totally see gold price going further up from that. We'll have to see what Powell announces later today. Okay. Last thing I'd like to say is, of course, just like in the video that I discussed before, don't forget, as gold traders, we want to be very, very wary of the 10-year treasury 10-year treasury yields chart. Okay. Um, this can definitely cause gold to go a little bearish, or become very, very volatile, especially if we see a push towards 2% in the yields chart. That's one thing we definitely need to monitor. But I don't think that I wouldn't be too worried about looking at the dollar chart and just making this kind of very, very simplified uh, correlation that if dollar goes up, gold is going to go down. That's definitely not the case in this type of environment, right? We have to understand that in this scenario where interest rates aren't going to go up, both the dollar and gold can go up in price because they're both safe havens. Okay, so we have to understand that, okay, as gold traders. All right, that's it for today, guys. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much and everything that I was saying makes sense. If you have any questions, please leave a comment or consider giving this video a like. Depending on what's announced, I may do a video reacting to everything that was announced by Powell and just analyzing the price action as a result, maybe later in the week. Okay, guys? And anyways, talk to you soon, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.